once again, everyone, welcome to episode 26 of the Drunk Friend podcast. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Travis. That guy over there is Alex. And Alex, dude, been looking. I got my YouTube feed up here, and scrolling. I see Metal Jesus. He's talking about the ZX Spectrum. Scrolling. He's fat, I guess. Scrolling. There's no SNES Drunk for weeks. What's happening? You all right over there?
Totally fine. Yeah, my real job is kind of busy, and I don't know. I wanted a real break. My first break in July didn't really feel like a break at all.
Right. Yeah.
This is a real break where I'm really kind of taking a break. I'm not writing anything. I'm playing a lot of 3DS actually, and I don't have. Even if I wanted to do a review on that stuff, I don't have a way of capturing footage from that.
You know, you could just record you playing a 3DS like on a couch, like really far away, and just have that with the dogs walking by on occasion and like Pearl bringing you a drink and walking away. But you talk over it like it's just a regular review. That'd be great.
Yeah. That could work. Yeah, I think that would need to be its own channel, but yeah, that would work. It would be like an Ashens type thing. I still wouldn't show my face. It would just be my hands and like the Game Boy and the dogs, of course. But yeah, that could potentially work.
Yeah, it's like a SNES voyeurism thing. People will subscribe to that. They will be into it.
They probably would. Yeah, I played. I got a few new games. New to me. Metroid Samus Returns has been fun, and it's your classic Metroid stuff. You know, it's as good as some of the Metroidvania, or as I snobbishly call them, exploration platformers. I
call them Castleroids.
Yeah, I still think those are better. Metroid does it better than all those people. All due respect to. To games like I almost called it Sleepy Hollow, Hollow Knight,
yeah,
and games like that. They're all very, very good, but it's Metroid just hits the right spot for me. I think a lot of it has to do with Samus, and she just looks like such a badass.
Yeah,
and that suit is awesome. All the powers you get are just cool. Yeah, and I'm stuck in area number 2 so far. I still have about 30 more Metroids to destroy. It feels like I soft locked myself in this particular area because I'm trying to reach the elevator to get out of this area, and I can't get there, and I don't know what else I can do. But I guess that's the allure of Metroid games.
It is, right? I like that when it's like, okay, I've expelled every option. What am I missing? Like,
yeah.
When I get to that question, in especially those early Metroids, it's always kind of where most games I'm frustrated because I know they fucked me over. In Metroid, I know it's something clever I haven't thought of yet, and that's the fun thing.
Yeah, and they do a nice job not being too deliberate with what power you need to use. Like, for example, there is a rolling ball. I'm not even sure what the game calls it. It allows you to roll on the walls and ceilings.
Oh, like the spider. I think it's called Spider something.
Yeah, Spider Ball. That's what it is. Yeah. And the game you get the power, and then the game gives you a very simple way of like, oh, I need to be using this here to get to this next boss. And but after that, the game does a really nice job. Like it's not telegraphing every instance of where you need to use that. You need to remember that you have it later on, so you can bust it out at the appropriate time, which they do such a good job with stuff like that. So I'm enjoying that game.
So I gotta ask, is that a faithful like 1-for-1 of the original Game Boy, or is it the Game Boy recipe, but it's definitely like it's got its own modern flourishes to it?
Oh, it definitely has modern flourishes.
Okay.
It's got the map on the bottom screen updating in real time. It makes great use of every button on the 3DS, which is I always love. I hate when games don't use buttons. It's like you got to go to a menu to get this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what about this button right here? I hate stuff like that.
As a SNES man, you see that L and R button ignored all the time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, or games like Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball, where the only button is B.
Somehow it has to come up. It has to come up.
But no, yeah, it's modernized for sure, and it's all new stuff, and yeah, it's really fun. I like it, and of course all the bells and whistles and all the environments and all that stuff.
Cool.
Are awesome. In addition to that, I did also pick up Super Mario 3D Land. I've played it before, and it's really good. And we got a bit contentious when I brought it up to you, because I was like, I wish this was what Mario 64 was.
Oh.
And you were like, whoa, pump the brakes, son.
Easy. What do you wish my childhood was different? Is that what I just heard you say?
There's certain stuff about it. I could pick apart and nitpick flaws in just about every N64 game. Like, once you get to the desert stages in Mario, and you start, like, the game starts opening up. Once you get to some of the platforming, it's just such a pain.
No, I agree. I definitely have an affinity for it, purely nostalgic. I think it's a great game and maybe one of the best ones. It's definitely a top 2 or 3 on that system. But that's not saying a whole lot, because the N64 didn't age well. But man, I do have a soft spot for that game. It might be the first game I 100%ed. Like, as a kid, I got like all the stars, all the coins. Like, I was in love with it. And nice. Maybe it was because it was the only N64 game I had for like 2 years. But still,
that's pretty cool.
Can't debate. I mean, a modern, the 3D Land is probably, shades better. Yeah.
They've got the hang of like how to combine 3D and 2D now. Platforming is much more player friendly and that sort of thing. But I'm sticking with Metroid for now. I'm tempted to switch over. And I'm a one game at a time type person when it comes to playing newer stuff. I want to make sure I finish or at least get as far as I can in Samus Returns. Then go to Mario. And I also got Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. And I've never really spent a whole lot of time in these games. I just thought it looked interesting.
Yeah.
And it's something different. And all the stuff I own for 3DS is all like first party practically. Like, I've got Link Between Worlds, which is excellent. I've got Star Fox, which is excellent. I got Mario Sports Superstars. I've got Mario Golf. And then I've got, like, Bravely Default and Chrono Trigger and Plants vs. Zombies and stuff like that. And Radiant Historia. And it's like, I have too much Nintendo property. I would rather try something different that's also well-reviewed. So I'm interested to see what that's like.
Yeah, I know that those are like they have some of the most addictive loops in games, and they're super long. But it's like you'll play it for like 60 hours and be like, you'll wake up in a trance in a ditch somewhere with a full beard and wonder who's president. Like it's that kind of game, which is why I've stayed away from it. People love it too much, and I'm like, I don't know. So. But
yeah, that's why I've had to stay away from like games like World of Warcraft, because I know I'll love them. But,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, you posted a video on Wednesday for Dungeon Magic, which has a lot of dungeons and a lot of magic.
Yeah, boy, does it. Yeah, it definitely does. It's a game, and actually it's funny, we have a question coming up that kind of alludes to this whole topic of a first-person RPG on the NES, and there aren't many, and this is the first one I've reviewed. And I want to say, like, when I look at the NES, like, by the time companies at least got to the Super NES, they should know better. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some things like, why are you still doing this? But I feel like for the NES, I can give a pass for some things where it's like, they tried it and it didn't work out perfectly, but there's some good ideas here. And that's kind of how I feel about Dungeon Magic. Like, they tried a first-person 3D exploration game, pseudo 3D, of course. Everything is very 2D. Walls are millimeters thick, but and it runs fast. Like, you can move across the screen pretty fast. It doesn't load, like, you don't move forward a tile and it loads that and move forward. Like, you can move around pretty fast. Like, that I think I appreciate. But the game itself it lacks so much. It needs a little hand-holdiness that I think modern games are still trying to balance. Sometimes they hold your hand too much. They're like, here's exactly where you need to go and exactly what you need to do. And there's nothing for you to figure out. You're just basically following a waypoint and smashing attack. But in this one, it really just needed a little more, tutorialization for what it could do back then. I don't know, but it needed something to help you along, because I think once I figured it out, it wasn't that bad. But there's so many systems at play that it's a little too much. It's a little too ambitious for the NES. So I'm like, I forgive it for trying, because it's for what it is, it's okay, but it's not fun. Like, it didn't hold up past like a week after it came out, but I can see what they were trying to do, and for that, I want to pat them on the back and say, good try, buddy, but you just...
what killed me when I saw the video was the way stuff just pops up out of nowhere. Like you'll be looking at this endless horizon, and then it's like trees.
Yeah.
And it's like brick wall, and it's not even going across the whole screen. It's just like a section of the screen, and it just looks not great. But it's one of those things where they did the best they could with for the time, and it's an interesting game, I guess, but it's not for everyone.
Yeah, it's not completely unplayable, but you won't have fun playing it if that makes any sense at all. All right, so we have an email though that kind of goes right up that alley, and this is from Carl, who says Carl with a K. By the way, I always want to point that out. There's a lot of C Carls out there. This is a K Carl. They're different. They don't like each other. I just want to point that out. So this is a K Carl. He says, "Hello once again, drunk friends. I saw Alex saying that Swans is one of his favorite bands on Twitter. This made me very happy, being a huge Swans fan myself. Well, that makes two of you guys. For such a band with such a big and somewhat eclectic discography, what are your top 3 records? I like Soundtracks for the Blind, White Light, and To Be Kind Myself. Oxygen is one of the best tracks ever. So I'll stop there, Alex. What do you think are your favorite Swans records?
I think he accidentally capitalized myself at the end there. To Be Kind is the name of the album.
All right. I'm not a Swans fan, so that's a new mistake on my part.
I gotta be pedantic man about that. No, mine are also Soundtracks for the Blind, White Light from the Mouth of Infinity, and boy, picking a third one is tough. It'd probably be The Seer, just because that one really, all Swans albums take you off guard. Or catch you off guard, I should say. But that one's really good. But I was lucky enough to see them live, and holy crap, that is... Seeing a band like Swans live isn't like a fun, raucous show. You just kind of stand there and just kind of watch in awe of what's happening. Because they are... It's hard to describe. It's very... Pearl describes Swans as... It feels like you're just taking all your anxiety and nervousness and fear and everything and just vomiting it out. Like that's what their music is like. It's very, very intense. But then they have some songs that are the complete opposite. They're like beautiful melodies and very soft sounding. That's what Soundtracks of the Blind is, but it has like this uneasiness, like this really creepy underlying stuff underneath it, and they do that so well. Michael Girard, the head guy and the singer, is one of the most terrifying people I've ever seen in person. When I saw them live, some photographer got like right in his face as he was singing and playing guitar, and he was like, "Get out!" Like he was like Swans is one of the loudest bands I've ever heard live. Okay. And I could still hear him screaming at this guy, "Get out! Get out of here! Back up!"
Wow.
And I was like, "Holy shit, do not ever piss this guy off. He is scary."
Have you ever actually been I've seen a real swan come at a man on a golf course once, and they're scary.
Yes, actually, funny you bring that up. My mom got attacked by a swan when we were in I forget if it was at Lucerne, Switzerland. In Lake Lucerne, and there's a picture I took of my mom trying to feed this swan, and it's like snapping at her. It's one of my favorite pictures, so I'll have to share that with you.
So that dude, he just channels his inner swan. That's what the band's all about.
Swans are assholes, aren't they? God,
yeah,
they're very possessive, territorial. I don't know. I'm just making that up, but they're suddenly I'm an animal expert. But no, they seem very uppity.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Well, it sounds like you answered that one about the Swans. I don't know anything about the Swans, so that's definitely a you question. He says, also for both of you, what are your thoughts on first-person dungeon crawlers for the NES and Super NES? He gives some examples, Swords and Serpents and such. Any favorites? Do the Kemco games for the NES, like Shadowgate, qualify as dungeon crawlers? Thanks for the company, as always, your Swedish sober friend, Carl with a K. And I think I answered that a little bit there. Dungeon Magic, for sure, not that great. I honestly don't think any of them are that great. I mean, none of them are going to make their highlight reel for, top 20, top 50 NES games. Wizardry is another one that tries to do it. It's just, the the industry or the platform, the technology wasn't ready for that kind of thing yet. Shadowgate, I wouldn't consider it a dungeon crawler in genre, maybe in theme, but it's it's, if you want to crawl around a dungeon, I think you could play Shadowgate and have a good time.
Not familiar with Shadowgate, but
I think it's a point and click kind of adventure game. But yeah,
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It looks like Friday Night Arcade has a video on that game, actually. I'll have to check that out.
Yep.
But I liked, I remember my brother renting Arcana for Super Nintendo way back in the day. And that I thought that was really cool. The whole card motif. I thought it was interesting. I just hated the fact that you had to press pause for the map. And the map didn't always really make a whole lot of sense. It was hard to tell where you needed to go. I still liked it. I still enjoyed the look and feel and sound of the game and all that. But that was really the only one I had a lot of fun with for Super Nintendo. NES, I'd rather not go near any of those games because they don't seem all that fun.
I'll do it for you guys. It is.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll try. I'll see what I can do.
Have you played Swords and Serpents?
I've dabbled a little bit. It's been a while though. I didn't play it with a critical mind, but I didn't have much fun. I'll tell you that.
So the next email here is from Jono, and he says, "Hey there, drunk friends. The recent release of the new Battletoads made me stop and think about how anthropomorphized animals with attitude." Oh, I see what he's saying here. He's talking about just animals with attitude.
Yeah.
It was basically its own thing post Ninja Turtles. The question is, though, in the Warriors style brawl, as in the movie, who would come out on top? In the running, we have the Biker Mice from Mars. We have the Street Sharks. We have Extreme Dinosaurs. I'm not familiar with that one. Battletoads and the Mighty Ducks.
Oh, the Mighty Ducks.
And he says, have a great weekend, Jono. And Jono has emailed several times. We thank you for your email, Jono.
That's a tough one.
Tough one. I think we could rule out the Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, being what they are, humans and not actually ducks. Yeah, I agree with you there.
And they'd probably have to be on rollerblades unless they're fighting on ice.
Yeah, that's true. I'm surprised they didn't put the Cowboys of Moo Mesa in here, but
or SWAT cats.
Yeah, or SWAT cats.
That was another one.
I'm not familiar with Extreme Dinosaurs. I'm looking them up. I mean, they look like a group of strong Cretaceous era fellas. I think they'd do some damage. I think they'd do pretty good land or water. You got the sharks there. We've already considered the ducks out, and yeah.
Well, the sharks, I mean, they're going to lose the speed advantage that they have unless they're fighting underwater, which I don't think they are, because we're talking about the Warriors. None of the Warriors took place underwater. So the sharks, their big advantage, their speed advantage, out the window. So they might have strength and they might have teeth, but so do the dinosaurs.
I want to point out, though, they are street sharks. I mean, they're equipped for the streets.
That may be the case, but yeah, I don't know. I think I'm with you. I think I'm going Extreme Dinosaurs. Biker Mice from Mars, I mean, are they on their bikes?
I mean, the Biker Mice from Mars, to me, are the coolest of these. I really enjoy the game. That's probably helping me out. But I don't know how they'd do in a fight. Now, in a race, I'm picking them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. They in fact, I think they would see what they were up against, and they'd probably go in the other direction, which would leave us Battletoads, Extreme Dinos, and Street Sharks. I'm going Extreme Dinos.
I'm with you there. I think that's just going to be a drunk friend pick today, as we're going Extreme Dinos, yeah.
Yep, that's our lock of the week.
Lock of the week. Then we play our choo lock of the week, and like a beer cracking open and pouring, and then we segue into something else. Anyway, so coming up, we have a friend of the show. He's been on before, and he's actually a part of some other podcast over on polykill.com. He's written books. He's written 5 books, actually. He's going to talk about those, and he's written some video game essays. So if you enjoy reading and you enjoy video games, you're going to like this guy, because his YouTube channel and a lot of his own works are driven by video games and about video games. He's a funny guy, too, and he's very well-spoken. And it's Caleb J. Ross. You read it right there on the title when you clicked on the episode, so I don't have to not say it yet. So it's Caleb J. Ross, and I think he was a great interview. I really enjoyed talking to Caleb.
He's very well-read, obviously. But, I like talking about video game books. I think, though, they are vastly underappreciated and underutilized. And he delves into some stuff that's kind of interesting, which is like fictionalized video game stories, kind of like not quite like Ready Player One or anything like that, but he's got a good imagination for coming up with stories when it comes to stuff like that.
That's right, and I forgot to mention this when we actually interviewed him, but you should go and check out CalebJRoss.com. You'll find all of his works there in addition to the videos that he makes, and so stick around for Caleb. All right, Caleb, thanks for coming back on the show. I know it was last minute. The guests that we originally had to come on who was more interesting couldn't make it, so we settled for you instead. So thanks again for agreeing to come on. Sincerely, I truly mean that. And you are a beer nerd, so I got to ask off the top, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a beer called Black is Beautiful. It's an Imperial Stout, 10%. From Fields and Ivy Brewery out of Lawrence, Kansas. So pretty close to where I live, about a 45-minute drive. I'd never had this one before, and it's quite tasty, I must say. But I also got plenty of water because drinking a whole one of these during a time when I have to speak coherently probably isn't a great idea. So lots of water as well.
Nah, you're fine. I've gotten away with it plenty of times.
I will say it is a bitch to edit, but yeah, no, it's good. And that was actually maybe the best and most full response we've ever gotten on what you drinking question. You came out.
I prepare for it every day of my life. I hope someone's going to ask me because there's always a drink in my hand, right?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, in most of your videos, you are what we call juggling oats. I don't think the beer ever touches your lips, but you usually slosh one around while you're talking about something. So, but yeah, no, that was a very good response.
Thank you.
I'm actually drinking. And it's courtesy of another podcast that will be coming up soon. But I switched over to wine tonight, and I'm drinking a Madeira, and it's very good. And I don't know much about wine. I won't say much about it other than that it is brown and called Madeira, and I like it.
I think Madeira has some sort of entomological root in the color brown, so I'm guessing that's probably because brown seems like an odd color for a wine, right? So it's got to be related to that name. That's got to be special to it.
I don't know. It's closer to maroon, but it's got it's not quite red. Let's say that.
Burgundy? Would you call it Burgundy?
Dirty Burgundy.
Dirty
Sienna.
Ooh.
Yeah, which my wife refuses to do.
I was gonna say it sounds like a name of like a Soul Asylum reunion album or something.
A reunion of souls is also what his wife likes to call it. Yeah.
What about you, Alex? Are you partaking?
I am. I've got that same blood orange cider from Tractor Brewing out here in Albuquerque, and it's pretty good. I like it. I dig it. Works for me.
Heck yeah, man!
Can't go wrong with a cider.
You've been going at those for a long time. Are you buying stock in them, or you just what are you doing?
No, it's just I like the idea of supporting local, stuff out here because so much stuff. I mean, since I've moved out here in the past 6 years, we've lost one of our favorite a place called Copper Lounge. That place is gone. They used to have Dollar Taco Night on Tuesdays. That was the best. They're gone now. What do you call it? What was the other place? There was a barbecue place called The Cube. It was one of those places where you walk in and it's the smell. It's just like, I want some barbecue now. Give me all of your meats. And that place is gone. And there's at least a couple others I just can't think of off the top of my head. But it seems to happen pretty often around here. So we're trying our best. We really like Tractor Brewing. So we're trying to eschew. I know that's your gag, Travis, but eschew. What's the right way to say that? But we're trying to. I'm trying to get away from Stone a little bit. Trying to get away from the more popular stuff, just to hopefully try and support some of the local stuff, so they don't freaking go out of business, basically, because it's pretty rough.
Yeah, right on, man.
That's how I rationalize my drinking habit too.
Yeah,
supporting all of the locals. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, support the local economy.
There you go. All right, nice. So, Caleb, the reason we're having you on today, we wanted to talk books, or at least I did. I've been sort of on a video game book kick lately, and when I think of video game books, you're naturally one of the first things I think of because you do a lot of reviews on your YouTube channel. You've even written some books, and maybe we'll start there. And again, I can't remember how much of this we got into and you were on before, but could you give a brief, backstory or a brief, intro to your catalog as a writer?
Yeah, for sure. So I went to college with an English literature degree and a minor in creative writing. And so the only thing you really do with that is you teach, and then you also try to write. I did the latter, and ended up writing over the course of about a decade and a half, 5 books, a couple of novels. This is 5 books in total, which consist of a couple of novels, two short story collections, and then what's called a novella, which is essentially like a short novel. It has to be pretentious, of course. Everything in the literary world has to be something pretentious, so that's called a novella. And then I kind of stopped after a while, and those were all nonfiction. Or I'm sorry, those were all fiction, so novel, made-up stuff. I kind of gave up on that for quite a while, but I continued to read and just go nuts with reading and stuff. And of course, that led my love of video games, allowed me to then start reading a lot about video games as well. So.
Yeah, it seems like the video game hook, and I think we talked about this before, you sort of got bit by a video game bug right around the time, I guess you were putting your pin down. Is that kind of the timeline?
So I grew up with video games, as most of us probably did. So that's some of my earliest memories are about video games. I love video games, and I played them all like pretty consistently all the way up through college. And then about the decade or so after college is when I started really going to writing and sort of backed away from video games. And then after that, my life is cyclical in that weird way. And so I came back to video games. But of course I still had this, I guess, writerly sort of notion about myself. So I got just kind of interested in books about video games through that. So
I'm really curious. This is kind of maybe a bit too general of a question, but writing a book is really friggin' hard. How and once it reaches like a certain word count, like how do you keep it all together as one cohesive thing? I guess because I tried writing a book in another life like almost 10 years ago now, and it went very. I just didn't like it after a while. Like I got so tired of going back and rereading everything to make sure everything seemed consistent. And I got so tired of doing that, and I felt like I was rewriting everything constantly that I was just stuck. Do you ever have to deal with that, or what's it like for you when you sit down and you've got that cursor blinking at you?
Yeah, in fact, for the first couple of books, I was really paralyzed by that. I call it like paralyzed by possibilities, where if you have a blank page, things are infinite, and then as soon as you get started writing, you get hyper self-aware about making sure that you're maintaining some sort of consistency from what you wrote yesterday to what you wrote now. And so if you're rereading everything you wrote before you start writing, by the time you get to half a book or so, you're essentially reading an entire 150 pages or something. That's going to take you a couple hours before you even start writing.
Yeah.
So it really it worked for me because after college I lived alone. My girlfriend, now my wife, we didn't live together, so I had a lot of time. And that was kind of the magic point in my life when I could do that. Like, I don't think I could do that now with having a family and a full-time job and everything, which I did have back then, but it was a less rigorous type job. So that was part of it. I just had time. The other thing I found myself doing maybe in sort of the later books, it took me a while to learn this, when that was, I tried to get through the first draft as much as possible, like as quickly as possible. Because and then I would go back and edit. So there's kind of two approaches. I have a friend of mine, Gordon Highland, who's also an author and a musician, and he would write every sentence he wrote. He would mull over that sentence until it was perfect, and then he would move on. So by the time he got to the end of the book, he didn't have a whole lot of editing to do, and that's mind-blowing crazy to me. I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, it's way too hard.
I don't get it. So I would just vomit everything out as quickly as possible and then go back and edit. And one of the things that I found myself doing, which anyone who wants to, write a book or something like that, it was advice that I wish I would have learned earlier. But what I would do is after every writing session, I would essentially print off like the last page or so, and I would just carry that around in my pocket. And whenever I was standing in line or whenever I was, when I should have been working and not working, I would just pull it out and read that, and then just handwrite sort of the next section or whatever, ideas for the next section, so that evening when I went and sat down, I would basically transcribe what I'd handwritten, and that would be enough of a sort of what's the NASCAR term when like you lead into the race. That would be enough of that lead in to like get me motivated to continue writing like another 2 or 3 pages. And so eventually it was, a page and a half, 2 pages every day. That amounts to a novel after a long enough period of time.
That's an interesting way to do it. I wish I was that organized or that disciplined in other facets of my life. Like what you just described to me is almost a romantic idea for me. I'm like, oh yeah, like I would totally carry around a piece of paper and read it when I had time, and I would jot notes on it. Like that sounds like an idea I would have and think that's great. While in reality, if I had the time, I would just be watching YouTube or be like, I'll look at it later. I don't feel like it right now. Or so there's still an element of discipline that goes into it.
I think so. I would say that, honestly, a lot of it was when I was in college and I was writing. So that's when I started the first novel, was in college. I worked at a grocery store, and I worked in the produce section of a grocery store. And so I'd have a clipboard, and I was supposed to be taking inventory, but instead I would just put that piece of paper on the clipboard, and I'd walk around the floor looking at cucumbers and stuff and just writing the story there. And so I didn't like my job enough that I was okay spending the time I was supposed to be working doing that instead. Now, if I had access to, endless internet and a cell phone that was capable of streaming videos, it would absolutely be tougher. So I wouldn't get down on yourself at all. Like I said, I couldn't do it now. There's no way I could do it now.
Makes sense to me. Yeah. So do you consider the sort of that novel writing part of your life behind you? It kind of seems like you've kind of come to terms with it's just not something you can do given the your current life situation.
Yeah, the novel thing specifically, and I think that's more just I'm not as interested in novel writing. I've turned and recently sort of acquired an interest in maybe some sort of nonfiction, long-form nonfiction. I've written essays about video games and things like that. I've written sort of short personal stories about video games, and those are really fun for me to write. So if I was ever going to do something long-form again, it would probably be like a nonfiction type thing. And I've also, over the years, gotten more comfortable telling my wife like that certain passions are important to me. For a while, I was almost like, I didn't want to talk about like the stuff. I didn't want to talk about writing books or even doing YouTube videos really to my wife, because I couldn't justify it as a way to spend time away from her or away from the kids, because it wasn't bringing in money. But she was surprisingly just very like okay with it. And she sort of approved of it and was like that. One of the things she said to me when I told her I was I was in the process of writing a book, which is no longer the case. It sort of is gone the wayside, unfortunately. But when I was writing this book, I told her, and one of the greatest things she said, she was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like you'd be really good at that." And it's not that she has never been supportive; it's that I've never given her the opportunity to show me that she was supportive, because I've kept this to myself. But then once I let her know, like, this is what I'm doing, she's been much more supportive. So I think that's probably I'd be more comfortable, I think, doing that now, if that makes sense.
That's funny because I had kind of the opposite experience with my girlfriend Pearl, where I had her read like the first half of what I was writing, which I knew I was struggling with it, and I knew I in all likelihood had to like overhaul tons of things. And she reads it and she's like, well, first of all,
oh no,
the main character is a jerk and he's really unlikable. And how are you supposed to empathize with this guy and understand what he's going through if he's not likable? Going with the first person perspective is not a good idea with this. And she's absolutely right. Like it would be much better. It would read much better as the third person. But what you mentioned, some of the stuff you've written about the essays about video games and other stuff around video games. What are some of those?
Yeah. So the first one, I what I like to do is I kind of like to take memories of video games and use those as a launching off point for exploring the video game itself, or maybe the themes within the video game. So a good example is the first one I wrote was called Shoot, Jump, Run, Growing Up. What was it called? Growing Up with Metroid and Cocaine. I think it was something like that. And basically it was about how my father was addicted to cocaine. And he and my mom got divorced when I was 5. And one of the only kind of real solid memories I have of him is when he gifted me my Nintendo when I was like 7 years old with the game Metroid. And so there's this weird pairing between Metroid and my father. And so I wrote about that. So it's kind of a personal story. which from someone who nobody's ever heard of, that's not something I would say that people would be terribly interested in, which is why I also dig into like the history of Metroid and how it was an important game and what it really did for video games. And so I kind of want to make it as broad as possible, but while using kind of what I know and my own memories and stuff. And part of this is sort of selfishly motivated because I'm close to 40 now and I have memories that I probably will lose soon. So I want to figure out like how to get them on paper. And then the one after that, which I think is probably a little bit more easy to explain, that I wrote is called Being a Ninja is Easy in a World Full of Idiots.
Oh, I love this one. I read that in my bed one night. I actually just Googled you or something and found it on Amazon and downloaded it and read it, right before bed. And it's great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's about Tenchu, stealth assassins, and how as a kid I was super obsessed with ninjas. So when this game came out, I was like, I will rock at this game. This will be the best game ever. And I sucked at it, and it was kind of a sense of like I was almost like ashamed. But then my PlayStation, which was the first thing I ever bought with my own money after I got a high school job, was stolen by my best friend from my house. And I sort of tried to use my ninja skills to sort of figure out who it was and to like bring clues to the police department in a small town of 3,500 people. And it didn't work at all. And so, but then the actual like game development side of it is about how players don't really want enemies with really smart, intelligent, artificial intelligence. We always say, I want realism. I want my enemies to act real. But the truth is we don't want that, because then the games would be impossible. And so you have purposefully built dumb enemies. And so the idea of the title, Being a Ninja is Easy in a World Full of Idiots, Tenchu only works because the AI is dumb. And so I kind of play off those two ideas of me being this dumb, fumbling real-life ninja trying to figure out this mystery, and then the actual game development side of enemy ninjas being idiots. So that's kind of the stuff I like to do when it comes to the video game-related essays and stuff.
It's very clever, and there are... I'm glad you didn't spoil all the laughs, because there's quite a few really funny moments in that. I need to read the other one about Metroid. I haven't done that yet, but I can definitely vouch for the ninja essay. It's great.
Oh, thank you.
I have put a bit of thought into like what the lives of the flunkies in games like that are actually like. Especially the guys in games like Final Fight. Like you got that Simons guy who's just like poured into those leather pants, and it's like, imagine like him in the morning, like shaving his legs and greasing himself up just so he could put on his clothes.
I thought that too. I've always wondered if those enemies are aware that they're copies of all of the other enemies. Like, do they not realize that like they're just clones, And so do they think they're truly distinct, separate personalities? And it's like one day someone tells them, it's like, no, you're what's called a clone, and they're like, what?
Yeah. They don't even react at all when they do see a clone of themselves. It's just like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's like, another one of that guy.
No, but my shirt's green. His is red.
Like, I love at the I think it's the 4th level in Final Fight. No, it's in the arcade. It's the 5th level with all the motorcycles and all that stuff. But and there's like 6 or 7 of every guy.
Yeah.
And it's like those guys don't stop and think like, well, wait a second. Why is there everything in my entire life has led up to this?
Yeah.
And I find out that there's 7 more of me, and we're all trying to stop this guy, and we're all losing.
Maybe because their bodies just instantly decompose. They just flash and then immediately go away. They have less reverence for life than we do, because they don't have to bury the bodies. So maybe life is really a fleeting thing for them,
Yeah. Good point.
It's always weird to me when they all have names, and I think the Final Fight series and maybe Streets of Rage does that, where it's like there's 2 Erics on screen and they're both wearing the same vest that shows their chest hair, and they're wearing the same sunglasses, and it's like, do you guys not, like, if you just walked up and you saw your doppelganger, you would still fight me? You guys wouldn't talk about that first?
Oh man, that's awesome.
But anyway, so I want to sort of talk about your YouTube channel a little bit, because you do have a neat little series on there where a lot of it is book driven, and I think you were a part of what is it called, BookTube?
Yeah.
But you've also, maybe more in recent years with the channel, you've done some reviews of video game books. So in terms of like book content, because you have a ton of different stuff on there, but what's some of the book content people should know about on your channel, and what all do you do there?
Yeah, so my book content now is 100% video games, but as you alluded to, my channel started off more of a book channel that was about just reading and reviewing all kinds of books and also talking about my own books and things like that. And then after I did that for a couple of years, then it kind of transitioned to video games. But yeah, now it's any book on there is definitely a video game themed book. And I try to focus on books that I feel are a bit underrepresented, because there are usually when people think of a video game book, they think of a couple of things. They either think of something like what's the Klein novel that came out and there was a movie made about it?
Ready Player One or what?
Thank you. Yes. Ready Player One. So they either think of something like that, which is like a novel with like video game type themes, or they think of reference books. You can think of like Pat Contry's book that he made that was essentially just a bound book of reviews, that kind of stuff, where it's a compendium of a bunch of small pieces of information about books, but there's no narrative thread. There's no historical context, really. It's just, here's a bunch of things put together. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most people think of when they think of video game books. So I stay away from those specifically, and I focus on books that are, that tell sort of the history of video games in a narrative way, maybe the history of a very specific video game, or that try to take the idea of video games or what video games have done and explore them in ways that maybe a lot of people don't think about. So maybe in sort of an academic way. And as to be expected, those videos don't get a ton of views, but it's a way for me to sort of play my part in, I think, evangelizing for what I feel is a really important convergence of two mediums that seem at first like very diametrically opposed. Books, their history is with royalty and smart people and intelligence. The upper class, they were the only ones that could access books because they were the only ones that could read. And then now you have video games, which were originally designed as essentially for the commoner. They showed up in bars. That's kind of where the arcades were first around. And so there's just something intrinsically interesting to me about that sort of Venn diagram overlap between something that's considered all highfalutin and something that is considered lowfalutin, I guess. and I like to see those things merge. And I don't think enough people I don't think enough people give them a chance. I don't think enough people I think people who really, really care about video games could love playing them. But if they're at all interested about just history, I think books are the best way to do that. And that's not just for video games, but books are the best way to do that because they're able to focus on a very specific topic and get very detailed about that very specific topic without the distraction of ads or the distraction of other URLs or websites to visit, or social. It's just all kind of self-contained, and I really, really like that.
That's a good point. Speaking of highfalutin, what are some of your influences and some of your favorite books? Do you have any hidden gems in the book world?
Oh my goodness!
To channel a certain other personality.
Metal Jesus Books, of course.
Of course, he's very good.
He doesn't rock anymore. Now he books.
Yeah,
he books.
I want to read his Bible. I hear it's good. The Metal Jesus Books Bible. There's so many of them. So I guess, not so many, because then that'll scare listeners into thinking I'm going to talk about books, very specific books no one's heard of for the next 5 minutes. But I will say, the one I like to recommend to a lot of people, there's kind of two that I would recommend to a lot of people that I feel are probably hidden gems in the way that all of these books are probably hidden gems, because I don't know that a lot of people have read too many of them. But one of them is a book called Getting Gamers. And it has a subtitle of The Psychology of Video Games and Their Impact on the People Who Play Them. And it's by a guy named Jamie Madigan, who's a psychologist, and he has a podcast and a blog called The Psychology of Games. But he's just really cool because he basically takes games and looks at them from a psychology standpoint and tries to explain and talk about why people do what they do when they're designing video games, when they're playing video games. And the book is just a long form version of that. As an example, he'll get into fanboyism. Why do people fight over when there's a new console out? Why are some people PlayStation people and some people are Xbox people and they don't seem to be able to play nice together and they're always fighting and mine's better than yours? It's the
tribalism of it.
Exactly, yeah. And that's a very common psychological concept, this idea of fanboy or fangirlism. But a lot of people maybe have heard that term and just used it loosely, but he gets into the psychology of like what it means. And he's a very, very approachable writer, which I like. Like, he doesn't get into this academic jargon or anything like that. He's just a very, very cool guy. The way he writes is very cool. So if anyone is interested in that book, but is maybe intimidated just by, maybe you just don't read very much, check out his podcast, The Psychology of Games. And his podcasts are very much like the writing in his book. So I would say that from like an academic-y angle is probably a really, really good one to check out. And then I would say the other one that maybe people should read that came out a couple years ago is called The Tetris Effect, and its subtitle is The Game That Hypnotized the World. And this is my other kind of favorite video game book. So I really like the psychology ones and the academic ones. This is my other favorite one, where it tells like a very in-depth history of a specific game. One of the ones people have heard about is Doom, Masters of Doom by David Kirshner. That's a very common one that I think a lot of people have heard of. But this one is similar, except it's just about Tetris. And man, I didn't know anything about Tetris. I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I knew about Tetris. This book reads like a spy novel. Like, it's a nonfiction, so it's true story. But it's crazy how entrenched that game was in, you know, the 80s, like end of the Cold War kind of era, and
Yes.
Soviet Union and everything. I mean, it's just way deeper than I thought it was, and it's such a fascinating read. So those would probably be the two that I would recommend, that I would also probably consider hidden gemish.
Very cool.
Yeah, I've read that. I think it was actually Seth Rogen and Adam Goldberg, who are coincidentally the two folks that did the foreword for the Console Wars book that came out a few years ago. They were trying to make that into a movie, or I forget if it was them or I'm getting mixed up. I think they're trying to make Console Wars into a movie, but then there's another fellow that's trying to make that Tetris story, because it's crazy. It really is crazy. The background behind it, and how the creator kind of got screwed.
Yeah, big time.
And got ate up in just bureaucracy and nonsense and got left behind.
Yeah. But it's a happy story, because he does end up getting out, and I think he lives in the States now, and he owns the Tetris company, so it's like he finally got his deserved ending. I don't know how to say that.
And he's and there's plenty of other Tetris games now, so it was able to grow as a franchise, so to speak. But that's a crazy story.
Yeah, but Console Wars is a great one. You mentioned that one too. That one's a phenomenal book as well. So
it's interesting that the author took a very odd approach, where he novelized a true story from the perspective of I forget his name, the Sega president of Sega of America president.
Yeah, like Tom Blazinski or something like that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I actually just read that book, and that was part of the reason why I thought, like, I kind of want to talk video game books with Caleb, and we might as well record it, since I can't talk to Caleb unless it's recorded. So, let's have him on, talk about books. But actually, I assume, Caleb, you probably read like a hardback physical edition, but I was really impressed with, I don't get a lot of time to read books like that, or at least I think I don't. I probably could make the time, but listening to them on Audible has sort of been my choice way to insert them into my head while playing games. And the performance for Console Wars, and I should look up actually who read it on the Audible version. It was maybe the best Audible, and I listen to Audible books constantly, so it's not like, this was my first Audible book, guys, and it's crazy. They read the words. Like, it was a full acted out thing. This one guy did, all the voices and nailed all of the characters, and it wasn't over the top. It was very like, it was perfect. I was so impressed by that. So it was kind of like, I was impressed by two things really: the story itself, and then just hearing it played out in my ears was really amazing. I definitely recommend Console Wars if you're interested in video game books at all, but specifically if you like audiobooks. It's fantastic.
One thing from that book I remember, I did flip through it, and I came across something very fascinating. I remember anytime I buy a book, I have it, I just haven't read it yet. But anytime I buy a book, I always like turn to like page 50 or whatever and read like a few pages just because. There was something about Sonic's original design where they were supposed to give him a girlfriend named Madonna or something like that.
Yep.
And wearing like a leather jacket and have like spiked teeth. And I forget who proposed that. I forget if it was Sega of Japan or Sega of America. But I think it was Sega of Japan, because Sega of America was like, this is dumb. This guy looks like, this is just way too over the top. And when they came back with the other, what we now know as the Sonic design, Sega of Japan was like, "This is dumb. Like this will never work." And I thought that was fascinating.
It's really cool because that's like one of the rifts. One of the things I learned from this book is just how antagonistic Sega of Japan and Sega of America were with each other. They did not get along at all. So that was almost like a micro war. It's like Sega was fighting a battle on multiple fronts against Nintendo and against themselves. But yeah, it was Japan that came up with that crazy idea, and that was something that kind of severed that relationship even more. Was that? I would say like the other really cool detail that I just kind of remember from that book was, the old the guy who would scream Sega at like in every commercial, that kind of like. They called him in. It was some guy they hired to do that. And I don't know if he worked there or if he was like an actor they hired or whatever. But they called him in. They said, hey, we need this recorded like today. There was some reason they had to have this recording. They had to have this thing done today. And he's like, I'm sick, guys. I can't talk. And they're like, I don't care. Come in. And basically the guy had him record it when he was sick, but then kept telling him to re-record it and re-record it and re-record it until finally the guy was just angry and frustrated. And he would yell out Sega just to be done with it. And that was the one they ended up using. So it's almost like the weird potato chip thing where the guy, like the origin of the potato chip, where a customer orders thin cut potatoes and the chef brings them out and the guy keeps saying, I want thinner. And then finally the chef was like, fine, I'll just give you so thin potato chips you can't even eat them. Take that. And that was exactly like what the guy wanted, was these fried potato chips. So it kind of reminded me of that kind of thing where it's like the guy was just like, oh yeah, you're going to make me keep doing it? Well, I'm going to make it terrible. Blah. And that's what they used.
Yeah, also known as the Stanley Kubrick methodology.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, I'm going to drive Shelley Duvall so insane that she actually is insane in this movie.
And it turns out to be a good movie, so everyone forgave him.
That's right. Forced method acting is the way to go. And yeah, I enjoyed that part about that too, especially the part where I can't remember. By the way, I said Tom Blazinski earlier, and I basically mixed Cliff Blazinski with Tom Kalinske. It's Tom Kalinske was the name.
But we both said, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
so.
Shut up. But no, it's Tom Kalinske.
It sounded right.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it was funny to me later on in the book. The guy was like walking around and he heard kids yelling Sega on the playground, and that's how he knew that. He's like, wow, what a success. When kids are just screaming Sega at one another from like 2 feet away. So that's always fun. I'm reading another one, or I'm listening to another one. It's just called Super Mario, and it's by Jeff Ryan, and it touches on a lot of the exact same stuff you get from Console Wars, but it's more focused on, I guess, Mario as the centerpiece and sort of Nintendo's branding. And it's not very forgiving with Nintendo being written from that perspective. It basically calls it like it sees it. But the problem that I have with the book, and in listening to it, it's narrated by a guy named Ray Porter. I swear when he says Famicom, he ends it with the letter N. He's saying Famicom, and it drives me insane. And I usually listen to everything on like 1.2, just speed it up a little bit. And so I was like, maybe it's the speed up. Maybe if you say an N so fast, it just sounds like an M. So I slowed it down and listened. And I was like, no, I still think it. So now I'd be interested if anyone else out there has heard that audiobook. Are you hearing Famicom or Famicom come out of that? Because it's driving me insane. I almost can't finish it because I'm so anal about it. And I'm like, come on, guy. You
sounds like a convention for the Famicom.
It does.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. I mean, it stands for Family Computer, right?
Yeah, maybe it's me.
Yeah, it's you. I will say, yeah, Super Mario is a really great book because it feels like to me like the other half of Console Wars.
Yes.
Because Console Wars ultimately was sort of a Sega underdog story, like in a weird, I mean, in a lot of ways it was. Like it was supposed to be a fair and balanced sort of look at the two consoles battling each other out, but there was a lot more like writing. At least toward the latter half of the book, there was a lot more on the Sega.
Sure.
There was a lot more writing on Sega success than Nintendo's. And so, yeah, that Nintendo one almost seems like the Nintendo portion of that. So, yeah, they're really worth reading together.
Yeah, and I think Console Wars, I want to say, was that your first video game book review on your channel?
I think so, yeah. I believe so.
Yeah, and you have one. I just wanted to mention the ones that you've mentioned here. You have one for Tetris Effect, and did you have one for the first one you mentioned?
I have two videos that do dig into two of the chapters from Getting Gamers.
Right.
But,
okay.
they're not named with Getting Gamers is all in them, so it's going to be very hard to find them.
Good. That's the way you want to do your YouTube channel.
I know, yeah, exactly.
Very well done.
I'm not a smart guy. I've never claimed to be.
But no, I think that's such a good idea for a channel series, especially in the gaming space. Because I'm with you. I think video game books they're undervalued in a lot of ways. In that, people probably do look at Ready Player One, or maybe they just go ahead and go full fiction and grab Ender's Game and pretend that counts. Or maybe you're right. I mean, I just ordered Pat Contry's NES book. He had a Labor Day sale. So I just got that one, and I like those books too. I like the compendiums, but there's something about these, like the boss fight books and some of those that really dig into specific stories that just aren't popular that are still interesting. I think that's your channel does a really good job of highlighting those. And when it comes to books and YouTube, there's, to me, maybe I haven't ventured out into BookTube, but there's not a lot of crossover there. I don't see a whole lot of book stuff, and so you do a really good job of marrying obviously the written words and putting it in a video form. I think it's really well done.
Oh, thank you. That's a reputation I appreciate, and I'm glad you think of me that way.
It's the only good words I have to say about you, but yeah.
I do have to ask, the most recent video game book that I read is called Replay by Tristan Donovan. If either of you fellows have read that, because I thought that was tremendously well done and incredibly well researched. It's all... it's completely nonfiction, and I love stuff like this. But what I really like about it is, it's easy to go into, Nintendo versus Sega or like the big Atari crash in the early 80s and all that sort of stuff and harp on that stuff. But this guy went out of his way to go way into video game culture out in Europe, starting with like how certain PC systems were developed, like the Amiga, the Atari ST, Commodore 64, all this stuff, and each country kind of had put their own flavor on the kind of games that they would make. Like, for example, the UK was making a lot, as you probably expect, they made a lot of like games in the vein of, Monty Python style crude humor, stuff like that, just like goofy point and click adventure, like real just like, simple stuff. Whereas in France, they took the medium very seriously as like an art form, and they're creating like these text adventure games. This is back in like the early 80s, mid 80s. And they're cranking out these like serious adult stories, with like rape and, like betrayal and family crisis and, all this crazy stuff happening. So I thought that was fascinating to read about, because I had a complete blind spot for all of that. So I was learning tons of new stuff.
I'll put that up at top of my list. I have not read it. It's been on my wish list for a long time, so I'll probably bump that up.
I actually got, I forget what, I think it was one of the videos I did called Good Games in Unexpected Places, and I ended the video with one game I found that was made in, was it France? I think it was France. And it was called Captain Blood. And it is one of the most like intensely weird games I've ever seen, where the developer of the game created his own language, his own alphabet, and all this sort of stuff. And the story is this guy has to like kind of ingratiate himself with this alien race in order to find these 5 objects. And in order to do that, he's got to convincingly speak this language to them. And it's like, what in the hell is this game? It's crazy.
Yeah,
he goes all in with this. Like it's fully realized, and it's like, I never would have known about this if I didn't read that book.
And it looks like that was on the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum, which the ZX Spectrum is something that I really want to learn a lot about. It was only, I think, released in Britain, and hence the Z part of the ZX Spectrum.
Yeah.
And so, but that was like one of those homebrew kind of machines like the Commodore, where there weren't any really, there were companies making games for them, but it was also very easy just to make your own game, and a lot of weird stuff came out of that.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that was kind of a product of that. But yeah, that looks cool.
Probably, yeah, I would guess.
Yeah, I need to read that as well. I went ahead and bumped that up on my wish list. I'll probably, I don't know if it doesn't have an audiobook version. I'll probably read it when I'm old and gray. But
I'll just call you up every night and read it to you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
There'll be a lot of heavy breathing.
Oh, that's my favorite part of podcasting with you, which is what I want to segue into. Thank you so much for bringing up your heavy breathing.
No problem.
You had mentioned earlier, you were talking about, the different levels of mediums. You considered books highfalutin. Well, you don't personally consider it that way, but it is widely acknowledged that books are the higher medium and video games are the lesser medium, which is why I cleverly came up with the name.
Very clever.
Tales of the Lesser Medium, which is, a podcast where Caleb and I get together once every couple months, it seems at this rate, and we go through the narrative of a video game. We started out, our first series was on Resident Evil, and we did the first 4 games in that series. Resident Evil, from the PlayStation. Resident Evil 2, number 3, Nemesis, and not 4. No, we jumped to Resident Evil 0 because we went the way that they were released. And that does sort of encapsulate the nice, tight story from Raccoon City that happens. And then 4, 5, 6, 7 gradually go off the rails. We'll get to those one day. But that's where we started, was on those original Resident Evil episodes. And they've been pretty well received. It's not like a huge listenership. And I think it really requires people to have a very specific set of circumstances to want to, I think people want to have already played through the games before they listen. They don't want to be spoiled by us just joking around everything. And have an interest in the game, and then also just want to be entertained in that way, because what we're doing is we're retelling the story as best we can. We're putting it together through playthroughs and fan-made sites where they splice up the narrative and talk about it, and we're trying to compile all of that into a written form, and then also splicing in our own humor throughout it, so that it's at least entertaining for us to digest. And I've enjoyed it. I think it's been a pretty fun process. It's a lot more work intensive than I ever expected. But Caleb, what's your take on this project that we've undertaken?
It's one of the most fun things that I look forward to. It really is, and it is a lot of work. But you also sort of undersold it by saying it was only once every couple of months. And while that's true, every couple of months there's 4 episodes, at least as it's been so far, released all at once. So it's kind of like the Netflix model where it releases an entire season kind of all at once. So you get 4 to 8 hours of content every couple of months. And it does take a lot of time, but yeah, I really enjoy it because I think there's Travis and I both, I think, share a sense of humor, and we both like these old video games, and we both recognize how absurd these old video games are, and we both love just making funny voices and doing skits, sort of semi-improv skits, just making fun of the various situations that happen. So it's really fun for me, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I will say, we talked about it coming out every couple months, and I don't think we were ready for the amount of work, or at least I wasn't. I know I drug you into it. I was like, hey, I need somebody to read me a story while I make fart jokes every 30 seconds. I need to insert something that's funny. I even on this podcast, I can't go a few minutes without somebody chuckling, and I was like, do you mind? I know you're a literary guy. I kind of tricked you into it. I'm like, it's like a book. We're going to read it. I tried to trick you as much as possible. But I think we're getting better at making it a little more efficient. We're trying to tackle writing a little bit differently. And it's a thing that I try to fit in on my lunch breaks. I'm like, all right, I want to get through a couple more chapters of this game, because I'm watching walkthroughs and trying to put in all the absurdity. But I'm learning so much about these games that I didn't know. And I think that's really the rewarding thing about it is, while these narratives are really dumb and contrived, they're clever sometimes when you don't expect them to be, and they're dumb sometimes when they don't need to be, and that's been entertaining in and of itself. Is just like what were they thinking, and why this MacGuffin here, and why 5 hours? Did they just put this story element in so they could show that they've animated a way for her to use monkey bars? Because that seems ridiculous.
It is true when we're so with Resident Evil. I look at things from a developer standpoint. So I'm kind of an armchair game developer. I've made a couple of really tiny games just for myself. They're not for sale or anything like that. But so I look at it from the perspective of, there's a reason they're forcing this particular situation. Is it because they have to worry about streaming in data to get rid of data? Is it because they have to worry about making sure that they're pacing the variety of the mechanics every so often? So the monkey bar example, is it because at this point a player who spends 30 minutes in this particular section is going to start getting bored and they just have to have something different to do in order to push themselves forward? Is it just the cultural expectations. Video games have guns, so therefore, this character needs a gun, and therefore that's what it is. And so I'm thinking of it from that perspective too, and then also from the narrative perspective. Although I think a lot of the older games that we tackle are limited, not just in the fact that they're smaller games and they can't really handle as much narrative information, but at that time, games for the most part still weren't expected to be narratively rich like they are now, and so you could get away with a lot of weird nonsense, which I think you still can today. That's one of the things I love about video games. It's a rare medium where I think movies are probably the same kind of ways. Like, it's a medium where there's super opposing ends of the spectrum, and people are willing to accept both. Like, you could love fancy movie A. I'm trying to think of some highfalutin movie. I can't even think of one. But
Citizen Kane.
I was going to say Citizen Kane.
There you go. Citizen Kane. You could love Citizen Kane, and you could love The Room. Like, it's okay to do that. Like, no one's going to make fun
and
of
I
you
do
for that.
love The Room.
See, there you go. And I think it's the same with video games too. So, like, but at the time, there weren't really any serious stories in video games, at least not ones that had to broadcast loudly that we are a serious story game, and so that's what you're getting into. Now you can have serious stories, but not have to say, be careful, now this is a serious story.
Yeah.
Which I like.
Yeah. And one last thing on that before we transition into some listener questions. I will say I noticed in the Resident Evil series that no matter what, they try to eliminate you ever being around anyone else because they didn't want to program in AI for someone to follow you around. So anytime you come in contact with somebody in a cutscene and they're like, all right, we need to stick together, and then immediately they find a reason to leave you.
Yep.
and those are some of the story elements that we point out, and that you don't notice when you're playing it. You're just like, well, I guess he's gone again. But when you're forced to think of it as a story, it becomes hilarious and thinking like, where do these people keep going? They're in a mansion. Why don't they stick together?
Yeah. Or just hole up in the mansion, live there forever. It sounds like it's a pretty nice house, really.
Yeah, exactly. So before we go into listener questions, just if you're not aware, Caleb and I do a podcast called Tales of the Lesser Medium, and we have another season of episodes coming out here, probably toward the end of the month, maybe early next month, on our next set of games, which I guess we'll keep what we're working on secret, and you can be surprised when it comes out. But we do have the first 4 Resident Evils out there, and I think they're pretty good times. So it would be great if you gave it a listen, maybe let us know what you thought. But let's jump into what's that?
Be honest, though. It's going to be Griffey Baseball, right?
Griffey Baseball is next. The fictional tale of Griffey and how he was able to overcome Nintendo buying the Mariners, which I learned through Console Wars was a big deal.
No, that's right. Yeah.
It's a really fantastic idea for a podcast, treating these stories as if they, actually happened, and really diving into it and picking apart some of the absurdities, because there are plenty of them. So yeah, anybody that's not familiar with that podcast, please go check it out, because it is laugh out loud funny.
Awesome. Thanks for saying so. All right, so we have some listener questions. The first one here is Brad from Brooklyn, which I assume is how he says his own name. I'm not trying to be... It's Brad from Brooklyn. He says, he gives us a big hypothetical here. He says, you are newly anointed monarch of video games. For your first royal decree, what one design rule would you require every video game, past and present, to follow? For example, he says it could be anything from allowing gamepad remapping to visual elements to requirements on tutorials, etc. And then after this, he has a bonus question, but we'll go through this one first. What is one game design rule you would require every video game, past and present, to follow?
I've been playing a little bit of N64 the past couple weeks, I guess. And man, if I could just replicate that gray fog off in the distance that's in every single N64 game, if I could put that in every game ever made, boy, that would be wonderful. I think that's my pick. No, really, I really thinking of just Super Nintendo, it really drives me nuts when action platformers don't follow the obvious B to jump, Y to attack. And some games insist on doing A to attack like the NES did. And it's like, no, the controller is shaped a certain way for this to be the game that makes me the most mad is Ninja Gaiden Trilogy. It's like, oh, it needs to be like the original B and A. It's like, no, don't do that. And there's no way to change it either.
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're stuck with that, and it's kind of annoying. But I guess that would be my pick, other than the gray fog.
Yeah, you got to have gray fog. I mean, what made Silent Hill special? All the fog, of course. I think mine. I don't even know if this qualifies as a design rule, but it's something that I thought about the other day. So I'm going to pretend like it will count. And I'm not talking about the way you can do it to cheat a video game, but if you could include like a replay function like you can in sports games, you just watch something awesome again. Because I pull off cool moves in video games all the time, especially like in old video games. And I'm like, oh, that was awesome, and I'll never see it again. Like maybe I didn't record the footage. Not everybody's out there like Alex and I just recording everything we play for the posterity of perhaps turning it into a YouTube thing. I do cool things in video games all the time I'm not recording, and I'm like, man, it'd be cool to catch a replay of that, because instead I'm having to describe it to my friends. Like, so he like jumped up, then I pressed like stab. So like I pressed stab, right? I had like no hearts left. I had like half a heart, but like I didn't have any like health with me. It'd be cool to just replay that and be like, dude, check out this cool thing I did. And that's a cool thing.
That's a great one.
Yeah, not a design rule, but a cool feature that could be cool.
What you described sounds like a guy like repeating like a bad beat story in poker. It's like, is there ever a bad beat story like with gambling or with poker that's like, oh man, let me guess, the last card turned over and
yeah,
and it wasn't the card you wanted to see. Is that how this ends? Or another guy I think of is the guy who always insists on like trying to describe a song to you, like,
oh yeah,
no man, it goes and I'm just like, that does not help me at all.
Yeah.
No, and then I had a friend like this in high school that seriously, listen, and I'm like, I give up. I don't know. Okay, you can do that all day, and I'm still not going to get it.
Yeah, it's like people describing a dream to you. It's like that. It's never going to be as cool as you saw it in your brain at 4 a.m., dude.
Yeah.
Caleb, what's your design rule to change the world?
Oh wow. So I'm of the opinion. So I'll start off by saying this. I'm of the opinion that I think developers should have the freedom to kind of do whatever they want, as long as they do it well and with intent. So, like, if there's a reason why a developer puts fog in a game, or if the developer puts fog in a game, like Silent Hill is a good example. So, Silent Hill, the fog was in the game obviously to hide the draw distance, because the PlayStation couldn't really project that much draw distance. There just wasn't enough computing power. But they made it work because Silent Hill takes place in a dreary town and everything, so they compensated for it. So I'm like, good, that's great. Use that. But not every developer can be trusted to be that smart. A lot of developers have to cut corners because of costs or whatever, and so they start doing dumb things. So with that caveat in mind, that generally I'm like, I want developers to be able to do what they want, so I don't want to enforce anything strictly. I will say the one thing that is sort of a cheat, I guess, would be, I would love if all developers had like many more customizable options at the beginning, like to the degree of, like, The Last of Us 2 came out and it got heralded for its accessibility options, and it's just mind-blowing how many accessibility options there are. You can play that entire game with your eyes closed, like, because they have so many accessibility options to help you through it and let you do that. So for people who can't use the games, I would like that applied, but to everything. Like, I want subtitles to always be able to be increased in size. I want you always to have the option to skip screens. I want you always to have the option to invert the camera axis if you want to. Just, there should be a template, a boilerplate template that layers on top of every single PlayStation or Xbox game that PlayStation or Xbox as the platform holders insist upon, and say you have to have all of these 50 things customizable, right? Similar to how PC has probably been doing. I'm not a PC gamer, but from what I hear, PC has been doing forever. Like, I wish that would be the thing. And so that's kind of a cop-out answer, because I'm saying, like, a lot of things at once, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm the monarch. I get to interpret it how I want.
Fair enough. I don't think it's a bad answer. Accessibility is always a good thing, I think. Here is Brad for Brooklyn. Here's his bonus question. He says, you need to arrange a royal video game marriage for your child. You have received offers from all the great video game noble families, Mushroom Kingdom from Mario, the family of the King of all Cosmos from Katamari, Zelda and Ganon's families in Hyrule, and so on. Whose do you accept?
So is this where we are going to their wedding, or they are coming to our kid's wedding?
I think we need to arrange a royal video game marriage, and so we're picking the family, I think, that we're allowing it to marry into our family.
Okay, got it.
A regular old
Not that-
Montague in the other family situation.
The Braithwaites.
Yeah.
The
Hatfields and McCoys. Is that better?
yeah, that one. I know that one.
I think I'd go God from ActRaiser.
Oh.
Because I mean,
I thought you were going to say from Christianity.
I was like, well, he is a good pick. He's been strong this so far.
well, then I'd be God. I'm guessing then I would be what, God's son-in-law or something like that. Is that how this works? Like
Not
what?
sure. I'll need to read
Yeah,
Metal
I think
Jesus'
so.
book again.
Yeah, exactly. Because I want to come at Metal Jesus, and I want to be drunk Jesus, because I'd be God's son-in-law. So that's
that'd be fun. I don't know, man. I would probably say what he says, Zelda and Ganon's families in Hyrule. I mean, I don't really know how to answer this, but I think someone in the family line of Link would be good because they don't talk a whole lot and they seem very either wear cool hats, I guess. I'm into that. I think that would be a cool thing.
cool hats.
Just shut up and wear a cool hat.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you wouldn't talk ever again.
I love it.
I think so. The King of All Cosmos is a really good one, only because you know that it would just be bonkers all the time. Like there'd never be a calm time. It would be the most fun, except for the fact that he would probably murder you without a second thought, since he's putting his son through the task of having to create an entirely new solar system by literally rolling people up into balls and killing them, assumedly.
And his face looks kind of like a pelvis, which probably isn't good for the genetics going forward. But
very strong ball chin, though. Like that.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Big
so-
package.
That's true, and he flaunts it. He flaunts it, and I think that's how marriage into a family works, right? Like if I'm gonna get that big package, if that. So that would be a really good one. But I feel like since he led with that, that's why I'm primed to say that. So I would probably say I would love. I don't know if there's an entire family built around it, but like the Shantae games, like my kids and I love playing the Shantae games. Every time there's only been one new one since they were born, essentially. But the new the Shantae games we love. Now I think there's a lineage in there somewhere, but I think I just like the sort of Arabian genie. I would just love to be part of that party, and so I'll pick that, even though again it might be a cheat answer.
fair enough. It works for me. I don't know. I mean, you're the monarch. I don't think you can cheat.
Once again, that's true. So they should be asking to join my family.
That's right.
Like, why am I begging to join theirs?
Hey,
that's not right.
that's a good
I'm the
point.
monarch.
Given what Square Enix did with Final Fantasy VII Remake and the estimated 5 to 6 years it will take to completely release, if they ever actually do, what are your thoughts on Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross getting a similar remake?
I feel like we got to defer to you on this one, big
Yeah,
guy.
I'll just lean back on this
You're
one.
the Chrono Trigger guy.
I think Chrono Trigger's fine. I don't think it needs to be remade. It's kind of like Super Metroid. Like, I would never remake Super Metroid. It doesn't need to be remade. What I want to see is a Chrono Trigger, sequel. A real sequel, not Chrono Cross, which flimsily ties in the stuff at the end of the game, and it just did not do anything for me at all. But I want to see, Magus, a crazy Magus with, a big homeless guy beard. He's up on a mountaintop, desperately trying to find his sister, Shala, because she's kind of lost at the end of the game. I want to see that, and then he accidentally opens a rift to an entire planet of Lavos or something like that, where they come back for revenge against Lavos. Hellbent. There's a mother, like in Aliens, there's the mother alien. There should be a mother Lavos.
I think you have a book idea here.
Yeah, I don't want to see a remake for Chrono Trigger because I think it's one of the best games ever made. So it doesn't need to be remade, in my opinion. Whereas Final Fantasy VII had those terrible graphics with the polygony, pointy nose, pointy hair. It just looks bad. And then you've got those set pieces where you're running around and your character is 2 pixels tall.
Yeah.
And
you don't know which way you're running, or you might be stuck on a wall, but you can't tell. You're I think I'm still going west. Oh, no, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in a matte painting, basically.
Yeah.
It's kind of... that kind of stuff just hasn't aged well. That game was ripe to be remade because certain stuff didn't age well. But I don't think Chrono Trigger's aged poorly at all, and I don't think it needs to be remade. That's just my opinion.
Fair. I mean, you have the definitive opinion on Chrono Trigger, so I'll defer to you on that
I
one.
do not. Definitive. No, see, the key is to talk in declarative sentences. Like if you cut out all the qualifiers, eliminate words like might or I think, then all those nuances and just like say things, then they will become fact.
There you go. And that's what I've learned from listening to Colin Cowherd on the radio. But yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a good enough answer. I enjoyed Chrono Trigger, but I don't know the storyline like you do, so I think you would have the definitive response there. I'm actually okay with remaking anything. I don't care. I don't think it hurts the old stuff. It's not going to take my Chrono Trigger cartridge off my shelf, so whatever.
That's exactly the way I look at it too. Is if I might not like the remake, but if it's great, fantastic, I can buy it. If it's not, I can leave it and still return to the old cartridges. The only thing it could possibly do is maybe if it's a bad enough, like Secret of Mana, that remake was terrible. If it puts a stink on the series and then therefore there's no legitimate company that ever wants to revisit it again, that could be a problem. But if it's a one-off sort of remake, I'm sure.
My thing is that those resources could be put towards a remake that maybe didn't come out in the U.S. or never left Japan or something like that. Like there's a bunch of stuff like Live Alive, Treasure of the Rudras,
Terranigma.
I'm just trying to think of Terranigma. Boy, that would be really good. Stuff like that. I'd rather see that stuff get remade because it needs a bigger audience. But I mean, I wouldn't be mad at a Chrono Trigger remake. It's just I don't feel like it's needed.
That makes sense, for sure. All right, I think that ties up the show. Caleb, thanks for joining us, and especially short notice again. I wish that
it's fun.
I wish that better person that we had originally had come on, but this turned out fine. This is fine. We'll keep it. This was good enough.
I'm very happy to be the second, third, fourth, or even fifth choice, as long as it means that I can come here on this podcast I love and talk about books that I love and talk about video games that I love. When all those three things come together in this amazing Venn diagram, I'm happy. So joke's on you, I guess.
No, it's all good. Really, the only other option we had was talking to each other, and we thought, maybe we should bring on a guest because we didn't have anything to talk about.
That's getting old. Yeah.
So no, thank you so much. It's actually quite enlightening. I wrote down the books that you had mentioned earlier. I do want to catch those. So keep the book reviews coming on your YouTube channel. I really like those.
I will. Thank you.
All right. That's been another Drunk Friend podcast. As always, you can reach out to us with questions or comments at drunkfriendpodcast@gmail.com. We might even read those out here on the show. And if you want to hear more podcasts, if you want to hear mine and Caleb's podcast or some other podcasts from the people I hang out with, you can check out polykill.com and poke around.
Or if you got nothing to say in an email, no worries. We don't care. You can still contribute to the podcast by rating and reviewing it wherever you listen, and it helps us out a lot, and it only takes a second.
It only takes a second. What are you even doing over there? You can also find us on social media. I'm on Twitter at TravPlaysGames. Alex is, of course, at SNESDrunk, and you can find Caleb J. Ross everywhere at Caleb J. Ross.
That's the nice thing about having a name like Caleb J. Ross is because you can just go by Caleb J. Ross, and you're the only Caleb J. Ross there is.
That's right.
But all the creeps all know it now.
No Bob Smith over here. Sorry, Bob Smith, if you're listening.
Aww.
That music you heard at the beginning right there and right here at the end was composed by our friend Coolor. The theme song is called Electric Star Bounce, and you can find a link to more of his music on the Buzzsprout podcast page. And if our logo has you thirsty, you can thank Josh Leslie for that.
That's right. And you can even, I think if you go to the polykill.com website, you can buy a Drunk Friend t-shirt or mug like Alex just got, and it looks great. I like that design, so be sure to check that out. And Josh Leslie would appreciate if you did. Be sure to catch us all on YouTube, and thanks for listening.
And we hope you have a great rest of your day.